So let's do something exciting and interesting together. Tonight, we are going to be comparing two machines, right? We're going to be comparing two machines. The first one, my friend Rudolfo is wheeling in right now. What is this machine called?
Stand by.
A stationary bike. The cool thing with a stationary bike is within an hour you can burn somewhere between 300 to 1,000 calories. And that is a phenomenal workout. On top of that, you're working a plethora of muscles in your butt, in your thighs, in your feet, aka you can get nice and thick with 2 C's from riding this bike, right? It's a great exercise. How many of you guys have ever done like a spin class? Yeah, I think I did it once and I was like, this is not my ministry, this is not it. So this bike right here, a lot of fun and a lot of exercise. And Rodolfo, who is, or was my personal trainer, is demonstrating for us today what it looks like to put your all into riding a stationary bike. And if Dahl does this for an hour, he will burn hundreds of calories. On the other hand, we have an electric scooter.
Oh, yeah.
That Jeff is riding in. The great thing about this electric scooter, which Jeff is risking his life right now, is that all you have to do is hold on tight and occasionally steer because you don't want to ride into a wall. But I have a question for you guys. Between Rudolfo and Jeff, who's doing the most work? Rudolfo, again, in a matter of hours, Rudolfo is going to burn hundreds of calories. I'm pretty sure he's starting to break a sweat. Rudolfo is doing the most work. My second question is, between Rudolfo and Jeff's machine, who would win a race? Jeff, as he's rode around this place 3 or 4 times already. Tonight we're talking about righteousness by faith. Rudolfo reminds me of myself and a lot of us Christians where we put in a lot of work. We're investing a lot of energy. We're doing all the right things. We're doing missionary work. We look like good Christians, but Jeff is more like what we should be. The reason Jeff is moving is because this scooter is motorized. He's not actually investing energy into getting it from point A to point B. And we can liken Jeff, who's circling around Rudolfo effortlessly, as righteousness by faith. The thing where the motor is like Christ and what he's done for us. The fact that he died on the cross for our sins. And all we have to do is hold on tight. And God will get us from point A to point B. Dahl still hasn't moved. He's still doing more work than Jeff. But sometimes work doesn't mean progress. And how many times in our lives do we feel like we are working and working to attain a certain relationship, a certain career? We're trying to get from point A to point B, and how we do it is we ride a stationary bike. And so tonight, as Pastor Miguel talks about righteousness by faith, and the founding, the people who helped put this denomination into place, I want you to consider, and actually what we're going to do now is going to a moment. Dahl, you can get off. Thank you. Can we give our demonstrators a round of applause? What we want to do now for the next couple of minutes, because I know that each and every one of us, in our lives, we have areas where we are working too hard. We're investing so much energy into something or someone, and it seems like no matter how much we do, we get nowhere. I want you guys to think about those areas in your life, whether it's personal, financial, relational, whatever it is. I want you to consider these areas of your life and ask yourself, where do I need to get off the stationary bike, get on the electrical scooter and hold on? How can we in our lives hold on to God and let Him be the one to get us from point A to point B? You can take a couple of minutes to just think about that. And then I'll just come back up and just ask God to give us the courage the strength, the patience, and the trust to hold on. So just go ahead and reflect, even if it's just for a couple of minutes, and then I will come back and I will pray, asking God to help us. I'm so thankful, Father, that we don't have to work to earn your love. We don't have to work to earn salvation. We don't have to work to be quote unquote good Christians, that you've already covered us with your blood. And Lord, I pray for each and every one of us here tonight. There are areas in our lives where we feel like maybe we're working too much, or that if I don't do this, it won't get done. And God, I pray that you will teach us that balance. I pray that you will teach us, instead of seeking to diligently always do it on our own, that we will hold fast to your hand, and that we'll trust the truth that no matter what our plans are or how we think we can go about attaining them, your plan for us will always be sweeter, grander, and more beautiful. So I pray that you will teach us to hold on to you, that tonight as we talk about righteousness by faith, we will allow ourselves to let go of the need to constantly be moving but never progressing, and instead just hold on to you and let you move us forward. And I thank you so very much for your grace. I pray in your name, amen.
Our scripture reading for tonight is found in 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 21, and it says, God made him who had no sin to be sin for us, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God.
Tonight we are really blessed that we have Pastor Miguel speaking for us. He's a colleague of mine, a dear friend, a man of God, a student of the Word. He is our prayer and study pastor here at the church. Truly someone of depth and significance, and someone that I want to introduce to you as a community more often. So tonight, Pastor Miguel is leading us in halfway through our series on roots of Adventism and where we've come from, but why it's important to know that the future of where we're going is exciting, is meaningful, and we're going to go somewhere that we truly, as a community, can collectively say, praise God. And so, Pastor Miguel, come forward.
Thank you, Pastor Phil. This topic is very near and dear to my heart. My doctoral program and the emphasis of my research has to do with the use of symbol in religious language. And Adventism is chock full of symbols. Now, before I talk about that, I need to make a confession, and it's a rather simple confession. It is a confession that I have a very paradoxical relationship with music. Both my mom and I do, actually. Because we both love good music. And our hearts break at recognizing that we have absolutely no musical talent. And so most of our conversations when she calls go a little bit like this: what are you listening to? And we're talking about this week, and she says, what songs are moving your heart? And I told her, it took me about a second to think about that. And then I said, it's gotta be The Sound of Silence. The Sound of Silence is a hauntingly beautiful piece by the master Simon and Garfunkel. Now, it's okay. Simon and Garfunkel write this song, and it begins, "Hello darkness, my old friend." And if you're talking to your mom, and your mom's already worried about the state of your mental health, you begin to tell her that you're listening to a song that begins with the lyrics, "Hello darkness, my old friend," she kind of paused awkwardly, and she said, wouldn't it be great if you listened to something else? Because you see, my mom and I believe in the words of that great American disc jockey Dick Clark, who once said that music is the soundtrack to life. And so that got me thinking, as my mom was trying to change the soundtrack to my life, because every one of us, when we do this thing called life and we do it together, there are certain soundtracks to it. Now think about it. Picture it. You're sitting down in your apartment, snuggled by your cat. There's a half-eaten pint of Ben & Jerry's ice cream. It's really salty with your tears. You're huddled in the fetal position, and then you hear it, the song that is going to give you hope. It starts slowly and rather softly at first, and then it starts building in a crescendo. At first I was afraid. I was petrified, thinking that I couldn't live without you by my side. I know it's Sabbath, and I know we're Adventists, but we do sing this. Or what about that day you're feeling great? You're walking around. Everything is good. You're looking and walking just a bit taller. Your confidence is through the roof, and then you hear it in your head. Now you can see by the way I move my feet, I'm a ladies' man. But then there's the ending to the summer. Now we won't admit to this one. Your toes go into the sand. The beach is warm. The waves begin to crash against the shore. And then you hear it, the music begins to invade your body. Every single ounce of you says, don't sing, but you can't stop. Everybody, rock your body. Everybody, rock your body now. Because Backstreet's back. All right. It's a myriad of emotions, isn't it? You see, Adventism has a song. It has a soundtrack. And the music of the Adventist song is marked by the dissonance of disappointment. As a denomination, we begin by saying Jesus is coming soon. We know the time and we know the date. It is estimated that 1 in 10 Americans bought into this dream, this Millerite vision of a Jesus that was returning on that fateful fall day in October 1844. So certain were they that they went and bought things they couldn't pay for. They asked for loans. They told their bosses off, and then Jesus didn't come. Awkward. Because they had to go back to inhabiting a life filled with ridicule, a life filled with pain. And so how did we survive as a denomination? Well, we huddled together. We clung to these ideals. Sure, we were Christian, but there was something more about Adventists. There was something more. The meter and the metric structure of the Adventist song was built with the notes of 5 S's. 5 distinctive doctrines that separated us from the rest. Sabbath, soul sleep, sanctuary, spirit of prophecy, and second coming. These were the 5 distinctives around which the church huddled for the first 40 years of its existence. We defined it well. We knew who we were as a people. We believed at first that if you hadn't bought into the Millerite message, then you were lost. We called this the shut door doctrine. And as time began to evolve, the door of that shut place called Adventism cracked just a bit. We began to ask questions. How are we to relate to other Christians? How do we relate to God? How do we transform the song of disappointment into a wondrous orchestra that talks and is moved by grace? Well, to be sure, the answer to that question was never easy. Because if you're huddled around what makes you different, you begin to make these things, these distinctive doctrines, the center of your religious and spiritual life. You begin to think that it's all about Sabbath. That Sabbath is, in essence, your golden ticket into heaven. And alas, the wonderful symphony is transformed into a cacophony of dogmaticism, judgmentalism, and sectarianism. If there is any denomination on the face of planet Earth that ought to be humble about what we believe in, it should be Adventists. Because we began by getting most everything wrong. And even in that, God still says, you are my people and I will be your God.
Amen.
So here's the first thing I want to tell you as we dive in to talk about two men. The first thing I want to tell you is, whether you're a third and fourth generation Adventist, crazy enough to call taco salad haystacks, or whether you just came to Loma Linda and are still trying to figure out what this whole Adventism is about, please be humble. Please be open. Please continue to grow. Because that's the rhythm of Adventism. That ought to be our soundtrack. So here's what happens. Talking about righteousness by faith. You've got two camps. You got the old school and you got the new school. You got the people that live in California and you got the people that live in the Midwest. The people in California were the liberals. That didn't start now. I know. When you told your parents, I'm going to Loma Linda, they said, oh no. That's nothing new. So on the West Coast, you had two men. You had A.T. Jones and Elliot Wagner. Wagner was a physician by training, and then he became a minister. Jones was a scholar and an intellectual. Both of them were editors of a magazine called Signs of the Times. You see, Adventism at its inception had no churches. It had no organizational structure. What we had was magazines and publications. The way we used to dialogue with each other was through these magazines. In Battle Creek, Michigan, which was the Adventist ghetto of the time, you had Uriah Smith, the renowned senior editor of the most important Adventist publication. And you had George I. Butler, General Conference president. Now, Butler had been president in 1874, and he again became president in 1880. And Uriah Smith had been General Secretary at the conference for all but 3 years since the inception of Adventism in 1863. Smith also had served as managing editor of our biggest publication. And what made Uriah really, really popular is he wrote this book, this amazing book called A Study of Daniel and Revelation. Now, Smith and Butler believed that Adventism lived and died on our fundamentals. And we said that we had 5 primary fundamentals, right? Now here's the problem. Leading up to the 1888 General Conference in Minneapolis, there's an issue brewing. And the issue is that both Jones and Wagner, particularly Jones, noticed that there are some problems with Uriah Smith's interpretation of Daniel. Now bear with me because we're going to get into the weeds. Smith looked at this text in Daniel chapter 7. And Daniel chapter 7 is one of those good old Adventist texts. It's a text dealing with a beast. And the beast comes out of the water. And the beast has 10 horns and then a little horn. And there was a bunch of debate. You can't imagine how much debate over what those 10 little horns were. Smith thought that those 10 horns were 10 kingdoms that were to follow the Roman Empire. That the last kingdom was going to be the Germanic barbarian kingdom. Now, at that point, the question is Smith right in his interpretation? And Jones, by looking at the history, begins to challenge this particular interpretation. And you're probably sitting there saying, man, we started with Backstreet Boys and now we're talking about beasts and kingdoms. But see, that's the ultimate reality of religious discourse, isn't it? The sad truth of religious discourse is that we spend so much time talking about things that are really irrelevant. If we had spent just a microfraction of the time and energy that we spent debating Daniel 7 in 1880 through 1888, Jesus might have already come. But see, we talk about all these other things because we like to control them. So here they are debating. From California to Battle Creek, from Battle Creek to California, who are these kingdoms is the question. Now, Jones believed that if we weren't faithful to doing serious scholarly work, then when people started being presented with the Adventist message, they were going to dissect it. Butler and Smith believed that if we were wrong in something so minuscule, then how could we be trusted to get everything else right? And so the leadership from Battle Creek sends a rather stern memo to both Wagner and Jones, asking them to desist. This is the text that the memo was based on. If you have a Bible, come with me to another really good Adventist text. It's found in the book of Revelation, the 14th chapter, Revelation 14. This is at the core of who we are. Revelation 14, verse 6 and on deals with the 12, with the 3 angels' message. But I want to focus on what I find most moving of it all. Revelation 14:12 says that as the 3rd angel is delivering his message, he asks for this. This calls for patient endurance on the part of the saints, those who obey the commandments and have the faith of Jesus. And so in the build-up to the 1888 General Conference in Minneapolis, the question is, what ought to define Adventism? And Butler and Smith believed that it was the commandments. They believed that God necessitates you to keep the law. And this is the rationale. The rationale is God has given us these commandments. And the question that is asked about those commandments is, are they arbitrary? Is it possible to keep them? And this is the great debate, at least as Smith and Butler saw it. Is it possible to keep these commandments? Is it possible to keep the law perfectly? Well, they reasoned, Jesus could. And if Jesus could, then we could too. And so the Adventist church was called to serve as this paradigm for all the world to see that God's law is not arbitrary, that it is possible to keep it, that you and I can keep the law perfectly, that if we only try hard enough, God will accept us. I did a study about the life of our pioneers, those who adhered to this particular message. And I was so moved by their dedication, by their faith, by their courage, which made it so heartbreaking to realize that none of them experienced joy. Because commandment keeping doesn't give you joy. It breeds fear and suspicion and anger. It breeds resentment feelings of inadequacy breeds pain and hurt. Now, Jones and Wagner knew this, and they knew it well. And so in 1888, they began to ask the question that we should have asked since our inception. Yes, Adventism has a special message. Yes, the message is unique, but the message needs to be Christian. So what is Christian within Adventism? And as they're studying, they realize that what is Christian in Adventism is shockingly Jesus. And so in 1888, aided by Willie White and Ellen White, they deliver this earth-shattering message where they began to ask the question, what is the law? The whole debate is centering around this understanding that Adventism had on the law as Paul saw it, particularly the law in Galatians. And Wagner and Jones are asking the question, what matters more to Jesus? What you do or who you know? And they end up recognizing that we can do many a thing. That we can have the beauty of Sabbath, that we can have comfort in the state of the dead, that we can have beautiful message of the spirit of prophecy, that we can believe that Jesus is coming again, that we can believe that Jesus is serving as our intercessor, but that means nothing if it isn't cemented in the person of Jesus, if it isn't cemented in the fact that once you stop trying, and you let God in control, then all the fear goes away. Friends, that type of religion is pernicious. When I was growing up, I had nightmare after nightmare after nightmare about this time of trouble like the world has never seen. And Jesus is coming. And before Jesus comes, there's going to be a persecution. And if you're not good enough and you're not going to church on Sabbath, they're going to mark you. And you're going to have the mark of the beast. And then you're going to die. And then you're going to go to hell. But good news, hell doesn't last forever. But it's still kind of painful, so it sucks. Don't go there. And I suffered from severe anxiety. I'm still recovering from that. And then I rediscovered, buried away in our history, 1888, a young group of young adults saying, it's all about Jesus. Amen. You don't have to try because He already did. You don't have to be afraid of failing because He has already succeeded. You don't have to define yourself by the mistakes you made because He sees you as a son and a daughter. You've got a new identity, a new name, a new future. It is all about Jesus. Amen. And when I discovered that, the anxiety began to melt away. And I said, my goodness, here's how easy it is. If you understand what they're saying in 1888, they asked the question, do you want to go to heaven? 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 Yeah. Do you want to go to heaven? Yes. Okay, guess what? You're going. Amen. That's how easy it is. Amen. That's what Jones and Wagner discovered. Do you want to go to heaven? Yes? Great news, then you're going. And I felt such joy and such pride of my church. And then Wagner and Jones left the church. Oof! What? Yeah, they left. They left the church. Jones ended up with some charismatics, praying for the Spirit to fall on him. It got a little weird at the end. Wagner got involved in some other interesting theories of the time. They left the church. Why? Why'd they leave the church? By the way, from 1888 to 1902, They were the premier speakers at every single General Conference assembly. So much so that people within the church began to see both Jones and Wagner as a prophetic extension of Ellen G. White. They began to believe that both Jones and Wagner were infallible, that their words were inerrant, that what they said went, and then they left the church. Out of the 1888 battle with this beautiful message of righteousness by faith, guess what? Wagner and Jones win the day. Butler and Smith end up seen as backwards, dogmatic leaders. And yet Smith and Butler stay in the church, continue to serve the church until the day they die. Wagner and Jones leave. Why? Because Wagner and Jones couldn't deal with the cognitive dissonance between what we say we believe and what we do as a denomination. We say we believe in righteousness by faith, but you better come on church the Sabbath. We say we believe in freedom. Do not judge any man, because of what he or she eats, but don't eat bacon. We believe that Jesus has come to us all and that the Bible is our only rule of faith and practice, but make sure to double check with Ellen G. White's writings. They couldn't deal with the cognitive dissonance between what we say we believe and what we actually do. And so they quit. And my prayer for you is don't quit. Amen. Do not quit Adventism. I know it's hard. Friends, I know it's hard continuing to be in a church that says God made us all equal, but some people can get ordained and some can't. I know it's hard to be in a church that says we want to be about justice and mercy and faith, but we don't want to talk about the plight of the poor. I know it's hard to believe in a church that talks about holism, but let's not get into the debate about who gets insured and who doesn't get insured in America. I know it's hard. I know the cognitive dissonance between what we say we believe and what we actually do is heart-wrenching, but do not quit. The church cannot and will not change if you leave. And that's why I stay. I stay because of those glimpses within the song. Those moments where the cacophony begins to crumble and you get a beautiful symphony full of grace. The moment where God breaks through and He tells you it is for freedom's sake that Christ has set you free. I stay for moments like 1888. And I stay because immersed in all of the baggage and issue that we have as a denomination is this. We believe inherently as part of our denominational identity that is as central to us as veggie links, that it's okay to say I was wrong. We believe in this beautiful thing called present truth. That God led us to say Jesus is coming, and then He didn't come. And we say, we got that wrong. That our leaders, inspired by God, said, nobody else gets into heaven, and then we say, we were wrong. That we say it's all about Sabbath, and then we discovered it's all about Jesus, and we can say we were wrong. We are a denomination that believes that God will grow us. And that as God continues to grow us, our ideas and our understandings of Him continue to deepen. So don't quit. Don't leave the church. Stay cemented. Stay cemented, because otherwise the chasm between who we say we are and what we do will continue to widen. And I, for one, love our legacy way too much to let that happen. I, for one, love a Jesus who says, come rest in me. Come rest in me on Sabbath, to let that happen. I, for one, love a Jesus who says, I will continue to speak, and my Spirit shall be poured out on all people, to let that happen. I, for one, believe in a Jesus that says, I will come again because I love you and I want to spend eternity with you. I, for one, believe in a Jesus who says, I love humanity so much I cannot condemn them to an ever-burning hell. And I, for one, believe in a Jesus who says, build me a sanctuary because I want to live with you. Grounded in each one of our doctrines is this idea of Jesus. And at our best, Adventism is a life-affirming and hope-giving dream. It's a beautiful song. So let's keep singing. Let's keep singing even if sometimes we can't hear the music. Don't give up. Don't ever give up.